The Lunar Diplomatic Station shimmered like a silver sentinel against the infinite black expanse of space. Its rotating rings cast shifting shadows over the moon's cratered surface, their motion a silent reminder of the fragile balance the station sought to preserve. Inside the Grand Assembly Hall, the air was electric, charged by the presence of beings from across the stars. Standing at attention amid the dazzling array of alien diplomats, Kai Sorran felt every bit the outsider. His earth-forged military uniform was immaculate, his posture impeccable, but the stares of the gathered crowd weighed heavily on him. At the center of the room, General Derek Thorne, a grizzled veteran with piercing green eyes, studied Kai with an expression caught between admiration and concern. "You're sure about this, Sorran?" Thorne's voice was low but firm. "You're volunteering for the Tahl Vorthos, the Vora's connection ritual, the same ritual that's killed 3 other candidates." Kai's dark eyes remained fixed on the hologram between them, a towering Vora warrior clad in ceremonial armor. The image flickered, rendering its piercing purple eyes and intricate silver markings unnervingly lifelike. "Yes, sir," Kai replied, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. "Someone has to bridge the gap. The Vora are too powerful an ally to ignore. They're also twice your size, telepathic, and damn near impossible to read." Thorne folded his arms. "What makes you think you're the right candidate?" Kai hesitated. It wasn't just his record of handling 12 successful first contact missions, including the volatile Centauran crisis, that brought him here. It was the gnawing feeling that he had nothing to lose. No family, no attachments. But he couldn't say that, not now. "Because I understand alien psychology, sir. And because we can't afford to fail." Before Thorne could respond, the assembly hall doors rumbled open, and every voice fell silent. Standing in the entryway was Tahlara, the Vora emissary. Her sapphire skin shimmered under the station's artificial light, the ceremonial etchings on her armor glowing faintly as she stepped forward. At over 8 feet tall, she dwarfed the gathered diplomats, her solid purple eyes sweeping the room like a predator sizing up prey. Kai's breath caught. The HD renders hadn't done her justice. "Last chance to reconsider, Captain," Thorne murmured. Kai shook his head. "I'm in, sir." Tahlara's gaze finally settled on him. Her expression was unreadable, but when she spoke, her voice carried a resonance that stirred the air itself. "You are smaller than expected." A ripple of nervous laughter swept through the crowd. Kai didn't flinch. "Good things come in small packages," he replied, forcing a smile. "Humor," she said, tilting her head. "A curious defense mechanism." "Not a defense," Kai corrected, stepping forward. "A tool for connection." For a moment, her gaze lingered on him, unreadable as ever. Then she turned sharply, addressing the assembly with the fluid cadence of her people's language. The diplomats resumed their exchanges, but Kai could feel her attention on him, a presence that loomed like a shadow over his thoughts. The formal dinner that evening was a diplomatic labyrinth. Kai found himself seated across from Tahlara, a placement that allowed them to meet each other's gaze more easily. The table had been modified to accommodate the various anatomies of the gathered species, but even so, Tahlara's massive hands made the utensils look comically small. "Why did you volunteer for this mission?" Tahlara asked, her voice soft but probing. Kai hesitated. "Honest answer or diplomatic one?" "Always honesty," she replied, her solid eyes locking onto his. "Because no one else would," he said simply. "And because I believe we can't afford to keep building walls between us." Her fingers paused over her plate. "You are afraid?" "Terrified," Kai admitted. "But fear sharpens the mind. I'd rather act in spite of it than let it control me." Tahlara regarded him for a long moment, then inclined her head. "Unexpected," she murmured. Before he could respond, the station's alarms shattered the delicate atmosphere. Red lights pulsed as a voice blared in multiple languages. "Security breach in Sector 7. All personnel proceed to secure areas immediately." Kai's heart lurched. Sector 7 housed the station's power core. He was on his feet before the announcement finished, drawing his sidearm. "Sector 7, he muttered, glancing at Tahlara. "That's near the core." "You know this station's layout?" she asked, rising with the fluid grace of a predator. Memorized it, Kai said, already calculating routes in his mind. Want to help me save a few thousand lives? Her lips twitched, almost imperceptibly. Lead the way, small warrior. Chapter 3, Unity in Chaos. Navigating the station's maintenance tunnels with Tahlara was a feat of ingenuity and determination. She had to crawl through spaces designed for beings half her size, her movements surprisingly controlled despite the constraints. When they emerged near the power core, they found 3 intruders attempting to breach the outer shielding with plasma cutters. Kai motioned for Tahlara to hold back while he assessed their movements. 3 targets, he whispered. I can. Tahlara didn't wait. With a battle cry that echoed through the chamber, she launched herself at the nearest attacker, her strength sending them crashing into the far wall. Kai cursed under his breath, providing cover fire as she decimated their ranks with a mixture of brute force and startling precision. When the fight was over, the attackers lay subdued. Kai turned to Tahlara, shaking his head. Subtlety isn't your strong suit, is it? Subtlety is overrated, she replied, wiping alien blood from her armor. And you planned your strategy around my directness. Because connection is about working with differences, not against them. For the first time, her lips curved into a faint smile. Perhaps you are not entirely inadequate. The attackers had been subdued, but the air in the station remained charged with tension. Security teams arrived to secure the area, their questioning glances flicking between Kai and Tahlara. The commander of the station's guards, a stern-faced woman named Commander Ilana Vaylor, approached with an air of grim efficiency. Captain Sorran, she said briskly, her eyes narrowing at the unconscious intruders. We've identified these attackers as part of a rogue faction. They oppose the connection ritual and the entire Alliance initiative. Kai nodded, his expression grim. What's their endgame? To dismantle this station if they have to, Vaylor replied. Their leaders believe that collaboration between our species threatens both cultures. Kai's jaw tightened. How many more are there? We're still sweeping the station, but we believe this group was only a forward team. As Vaylor briefed them, Tahlara knelt by one of the unconscious attackers, her fingers brushing a small insignia on the sleeve of their uniform. Her purple eyes narrowed. This mark belongs to a splinter sect of the Vora. They call themselves the Kash'tal Vein, the guardians of purity. They believe our traditions must remain untainted. Kai glanced at her. So it's not just humans opposing this. Great. Tahlara rose to her full height, her expression unyielding. The Kash'tal Vein are dangerous. They see connection as heresy and would sacrifice anything to stop it. Kai exchanged a look with Vaylor. We need to double security and move up the timeline for the connection ritual. If they're this desperate, we can't afford to give them time to regroup. Agreed, Vaylor said. But if this fails, Captain, there won't be a second chance. The next morning, the training intensified. Kai and Tahlara stood in the empty chamber set aside for their connection preparations. The station's simulated sunlight streamed through the windows, but the warmth did little to ease the weight pressing down on Kai's shoulders. Tahlara studied him, her expression unreadable. Your mind is strong, but inflexible, she said, circling him as though evaluating his form. It is like a fortress, powerful but closed. It's kept me alive, Kai replied, rolling his shoulders to loosen the tension. You're asking me to tear down walls I've spent my entire life building. Yes, Tahlara said simply, because this is not survival, Kai Sorran. This is transformation. She reached out, her fingers brushing his temples. A jolt of energy coursed through him, as if a lightning strike had ignited his neurons. He gasped, staggering back. Again, she said. Kai gritted his teeth, nodding. He closed his eyes, willing his mind to open, to let her in. When the next pulse of her presence came, it felt less like an invasion and more like a tide, washing over him with measured force. He glimpsed fragments of her memories. A young Tahlara standing before a council of elders, the weight of her people's expectations pressing down on her shoulders. A warrior's path, carved from duty. When the connection broke, both of them were breathing heavily. Better, she said, a faint note of approval in her voice. That evening, Kai sat alone in his quarters, replaying the day's events in his mind. He felt raw, his thoughts laid bare in a way he'd never experienced before. The knock at his door was sharp, breaking his reverie. It was Envoy Malik Jaran, his face tight with worry. "Captain Sorran, we need to talk?" Kai stepped aside, letting Jaran enter. The envoy wasted no time. "There's growing opposition within the diplomatic corps. Some of the other human delegates believe this alliance gives the Vora too much influence. They're pressuring the council to cancel the ritual." Kai's fists clenched. "And let the extremists win? That's insanity." Jaren's voice dropped to a whisper. "It's more than political posturing. I've intercepted transmissions suggesting a human faction is working with the Kash'tal Vein." Kai's blood ran cold. "You're saying this isn't just about stopping the ritual. They're trying to sabotage the entire alliance." Jaran nodded. "I've already reported this to Commander Vaylor, but you need to watch your back. You and Tahlara have become symbols of this alliance. That makes you targets." The next day, Kai approached Tahlara in the training chamber, her imposing figure framed by the station's artificial sunrise. She turned to face him, her expression carefully neutral. "Did you sleep?" she asked. Kai shook his head. "Not much. We've got problems. There's more opposition than we thought, on both sides." Her eyes narrowed. "Do you believe they will act?" "I don't just believe it," Kai said grimly. "I know it, and we need to be ready." Tahlara stepped closer, towering over him, her presence as imposing as ever. "Then let us ensure they cannot stop us." The attack came without warning. Kai and Tahlara were returning from a late training session when the corridor lights flickered, plunging them into semi-darkness. A faint whirring sound was all the warning Kai had before a drone darted out of the shadows, plasma bolts erupting from its turret. Tahlara moved with lightning speed, her hand snapping out to crush the drone like paper. But it was only the first wave. Figures emerged from concealed panels along the walls, armed with plasma rifles and blade-like weapons. Kai dropped into a combat stance, firing precise shots that disarmed one of the attackers. Tahlara, a blur of strength and agility, dispatched another with a brutal kick that sent them sprawling into the bulkhead. Through their shared connection, Kai felt her thoughts brushing against his, an instinctive exchange of tactics. "Behind you," her mental voice rang in his mind, and he spun just in time to deflect an attacker's blade with the butt of his rifle. The fight was brief but vicious. When the last assailant fell, Tahlara knelt by one of the unconscious figures, examining their armor. "Kash'tal Vein," she said darkly. "Their reach is greater than I feared." Kai wiped blood from his brow. "They're not acting alone. We need to finish the ritual before they regroup." The Grand Assembly Hall, once a symbol of interstellar diplomacy, now echoed with heated arguments. Delegates from both species filled the chamber, their voices rising in anger. The holographic representation of the Tahl Vorthos ritual flickered in the center of the room, a visual reminder of the stakes. Ambassador Malik Jaran stood at the podium, his voice strained. "If we abandon the ritual now, we lose more than an alliance. We lose hope for peace." From across the room, Elder Caltherin, a high-ranking Vora conservative, raised her towering frame, her silver ceremonial staff glinting under the artificial lights. "The Tahl Vorthos is sacred. To dilute it with alien involvement is an affront to centuries of tradition." Kai sat on the sidelines, his jaw clenched. Tahlara stood beside him, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable, though her thoughts whispered through their connection. "They are afraid of what they cannot control," she sent. "And it's tearing everything apart," Kai replied silently. General Thorne, standing to Kai's right, leaned in. "This council is falling apart, Captain. If this ritual fails, if you fail, our relations with the Vora will collapse." Kai met Tahlara's gaze. "Then we don't let it fail." But as the council descended further into chaos, a figure in the shadows slipped away unnoticed, carrying whispers of betrayal. The next day, Kai and Tahlara arrived at the Sacred Forge, a chamber deep within the Vora enclave on the station. The room pulsed with an eerie energy, its walls engraved with intricate glyphs that seemed to shimmer as they approached. "This is where the Tahl Vorthos will reach its peak," Tahlara said, her voice reverent. "The forge was crafted by my ancestors to channel the connection between souls." Kai felt a shiver run through him as he stepped into the room. The atmosphere was heavy, almost alive. He glanced at Tahlara. And this will prepare us for the final ritual? Yes, she replied, her eyes glowing faintly. But the forge does not just prepare. It reveals. Kai raised an eyebrow. Reveals what? Truths, Tahlara said. About ourselves. About each other. Truths we may not wish to see. The forge activated with a low hum, bathing the chamber in a kaleidoscope of colors. As Kai and Tahlara moved to the center of the room, a beam of energy enveloped them. Memories and emotions surged through their minds, weaving together in a torrent of shared experience. Kai saw Tahlara's childhood again, but with new clarity. He felt the sting of her isolation, the weight of her duty, and the quiet ache she carried for something more. In return, Tahlara glimpsed Kai's memories of Earth, a childhood filled with loss, a career built on survival, and the loneliness that had followed him to the stars. When the beam faded, they stood in silence, their breathing heavy. Tahlara broke the quiet. You hide much pain behind your strength. Kai chuckled softly. And you hide more doubt than I'd have guessed. He stepped closer, his voice firm. But we're stronger together. Tahlara's expression softened, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Yes, together. Returning to the station's main deck, Kai and Tahlara were immediately met with grim news. Commander Valor approached, her expression tight. We've confirmed it, she said. There's a saboteur in the council. Kai's stomach dropped. Who? Valor shook her head. We're not sure yet, but the attacks on the station are escalating. If they're not stopped, we could lose everything before the ritual even begins. Tahlara's voice was low and dangerous. Then we find them. As they investigated, it became clear that the saboteur was more cunning than they'd anticipated. Key systems were being disabled, security protocols bypassed. Tensions within the council grew as accusations flew, each faction blaming the other. The breakthrough came when Kai intercepted a coded message. It was addressed to Elder Caltharin but routed through human systems, a smoking gun that implicated both species. Confronting Caltharin in her quarters, Kai and Tahlara found the Elder unrepentant. You think this alliance is salvation? Caltharin spat, her voice dripping with disdain. It is corruption. The Tahl Vorthos is a weapon, and I will not let it fall into alien hands. Before she could say more, the station rocked violently. A massive explosion had erupted in the central hub. Caltharin's lips curled into a smug smile. It seems my allies have made their move. The explosion crippled the station's main power systems, throwing entire sectors into darkness. Emergency lights flickered as Kai and Tahlara raced through the corridors, dodging falling debris and injured diplomats. The Kash'tal Vein must have detonated the hub, Tahlara said, her voice tight with urgency. We must stop them before they target the forge. Kai's comm unit crackled to life. Sorran, this is Valor. We've identified the Kash'tal Vein's leader. She's moving toward the forge with a strike team. Understood, Kai replied. We'll intercept. As they approached the forge, they encountered waves of resistance. Tahlara's strength and precision combined seamlessly with Kai's tactical acumen, their connection allowing them to anticipate each other's movements. When they reached the forge, they found the leader of the Kash'tal Vein, a towering Vora named Sorran Talon, waiting for them. Her silver armor gleamed in the forge's light, her eyes burning with zealotry. You defile our traditions, Sorran snarled. The Tahl Vorthos is sacred, and I will not allow you to tarnish it. Tahlara stepped forward, her voice cold as steel. The Tahl Vorthos is not yours to control. It belongs to all who seek connection. The battle that followed was ferocious. Sorran's team fought with brutal efficiency, but Kai and Tahlara's unity proved unstoppable. Their bond was no longer just mental. It was physical, their movements a dance of perfect harmony. When Sorran fell, the forge glowed brighter, as if recognizing their victory. The final ritual commenced in the sacred forge. Kai and Tahlara stood at its center, surrounded by glyphs that pulsed with ancient energy. The remaining delegates, human and Vora alike, watched from the chamber's perimeter, their faces a mix of awe and apprehension. Tahlara reached out, her massive hand engulfing Kai's. "This is our moment, Kai Sorran. Are you ready?" Kai nodded. "With you? Always." The forge's energy enveloped them once more, its intensity far greater than before. Their minds merged completely, dissolving the barriers that had once separated them. For a brief, terrifying moment, they were no longer Kai and Tahlara. They were a single entity, bound by thought, emotion, and purpose. The energy coursed through their bodies, reshaping them. Kai felt his senses heighten, his mind expanding to accommodate the vastness of Tahlara's consciousness. She, in turn, felt her strength tempered by his resilience, her clarity sharpened by his resolve. When the ritual ended, they stood transformed. Their eyes now glowed with the same ethereal purple light, their movements imbued with a quiet, otherworldly grace. Their transformation came just in time. A final wave of Kash'tal Vein insurgents launched an assault on the forge, determined to destroy the ritual's legacy. Kai and Tahlara led the station's defenders in a desperate fight, their newfound bond giving them an edge that no enemy could match. The battle was brutal, but in the end, unity prevailed. The insurgents were subdued, their leaders captured, and the forge was protected. With the insurgents defeated and the Tahl Vorthos complete, the station entered a new era. Kai and Tahlara's bond became a symbol of hope, a living testament to what humanity and the Vora could achieve together. Standing at the edge of the station, gazing out at Earth and the Vora homeworld on the horizon, Kai turned to Tahlara. "What now?" Tahlara smiled, her hand brushing his. "Now, we show them what's possible." And as the stars stretched out before them, their journey together was only beginning. The Lunar Diplomatic Station was quiet now, the chaos of recent days replaced by an almost sacred stillness. In the Grand Assembly Hall, a new symbol had been erected, a crystalline representation of two hands, one human and one Vora, their fingers intertwined. The symbol glimmered in the artificial sunlight, refracting colors across the room as delegates from both species looked on. Kai Sorran and Tahlara stood together at the center of the assembly, their transformed appearances a testament to what had transpired. The glow in their eyes had dimmed to a subtle hue, a quiet reminder of their bond. Their presence commanded the room, not through force, but through the unity they now represented. General Thorn was the first to speak, his grizzled voice cutting through the silence. "I've spent my life preparing for war, and I never thought I'd see the day when we could stand side by side with an ally like this. But you've proven me wrong, Sorran. Both of you have." Elder Caltherin, once a fierce opponent of the Alliance, stepped forward. Her staff no longer glinted with defiance, but carried a weight of solemn respect. "The Tahl Vorthos has shown me that strength is not in isolation, but in connection. You have my gratitude and my apology." Kai exchanged a glance with Tahlara, who inclined her head slightly. He stepped forward, his voice steady but filled with conviction. "This isn't just about us. It's about what we've proven is possible. Humanity and the Vora are different, yes, but those differences are what make us stronger together." Tahlara's voice joined his, her resonant tones filling the hall. "For centuries, my people have guarded the Tahl Vorthos as a sacred tradition. Today, it becomes something greater, a bridge, not a barrier, a beacon for all who seek unity." The room erupted in applause, not the polite kind reserved for diplomacy, but a genuine outpouring of emotion. Delegates from both species stood, their cheers echoing through the hall. Later, as the station drifted in the quiet expanse of space, Kai and Tahlara found themselves in the observation deck. The view was breathtaking. Earth and the Vora homeworld aligned in the vastness of space, their distant lights casting faint glows into the black void. Kai leaned against the railing, the faint hum of the station a comforting backdrop. "Think they'll remember this moment?" he asked. Tahlara stepped closer, her towering presence now a source of comfort rather than intimidation. "They will, because this is more than a moment. It is a foundation." Kai nodded, but his thoughts lingered on the future. "There's still so much to do. So many who'll fight this. What if?" Tahlara interrupted him, her voice calm but firm. "What if they don't? What if, for the first time, we have shown them a better way? Together, we are proof that it can be done." Kai smiled, her certainty infectious. He turned to face her fully, reaching for her hand. Her fingers curled around his, their bond a quiet hum in the back of his mind. "What do you see when you look out there?" he asked, gesturing to the endless stars. Tahlara tilted her head, her purple eyes glinting softly. "I see possibility. And you?" Kai's smile widened. "I see us." Tahlara's lips curved into a faint smile, the expression softening her sharp features. "Then we are aligned." For a moment, they stood in silence, watching as the light of their two worlds glowed brighter against the darkness. The connection they had forged, the love they had discovered, was not just theirs. It was a seed, planted in the hearts of their people, with the power to grow into something extraordinary. Together, they had defied every barrier, crossed every boundary, and found a truth that transcended species, tradition, and even fear. That unity was not the absence of differences, but the embrace of them. And as the stars stretched out before them, infinite and eternal, Kai and Tahlara knew that their journey was far from over. They had become more than symbols. They had become hope itself. Their future wasn't just among the stars. It was the light that guided others toward them. And as long as they were together, nothing was impossible.